My name is Sage Lovell, and I'm a settler here on Turtle Island. Both sides of my family moved here from the United Kingdom. On my father's side, my first ancestor arrived in Newfoundland, Canada, sometime during the 1700s. On my mother's side, our family moved here to Ontario from England sometime in the early 1900s with my great-grandmother. I am grateful to be born here on Turtle Island, to be able to work here, to be able to have access to resources that support my lifestyle. I also must acknowledge my history. Currently, I live on the traditional lands in Halton, as we know. It is rooted in many Indigenous tribes, including the Anishinaabe, the Atawadron, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississauga of the Credit. Over the past 10 years, I have worked in Takaranto, which is in the Dish with One Spoon territory, Treaty 13. Indigenous tribes, settlers, and newcomers have been welcomed to share space in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. The treaty outlines that we all eat out of one dish, sharing this same territory with only one spoon, which means we have to share. The responsibility to maintain the dish, ensuring that it never goes empty. And this means making sure that the land is treated with care, along with the creatures we share it with. At this table, there are no knives, which means we must maintain the peace. Today, we gather on these treaty lands. We have a responsibility to respect the land, water, plants, and animals that coexist, and honor our ancestors who lived before us. In acknowledgement that Deaf What is a cross-Canada project, we also recognize that access to internet is not always available to everyone. There are still barriers in Indigenous reserves and communities with limited resources, such as internet access, clean water, and food. It is important that we continue to unpack our privileges and offer our support where we are able to, which means signing petitions, voting for politicians who actually support Indigenous people, donating to Indigenous causes, participating in unlearning and learning about Indigenous history. We will never be able to erase Canada's history of its treatment of Indigenous people, the assimilation of Indigenous culture upheld by white supremacy, the abuse and violence Indigenous children and their families endured in the residential school system, and so much more. As settlers, we have the responsibility to highlight the truth that was hidden by the whitewashed history curriculum of Canadian schools. That evades any responsibility for the harm caused by the Canadian government and its people. It is important to share the truth so Indigenous people can live in peace. Hello everyone, I'm Li Xuan He, and this is my sign name. Welcome to another episode of Deaf What interview. Today I'm interviewing Sage Lovell, who came up with the idea for the Deaf What project. Thank you, Sage, for joining us for this interview. I look forward to working with you for the Deaf What project. We're here to learn a little bit more about you, Sage. Thank you. So how have you been doing since the COVID pandemic started? Well, pre-COVID, I was already dealing with some mental health issues, and then when COVID happened, my mental health had a turn for the worse. I frequently went to therapy. I'm still going to therapy. Eventually, things got better over time. I noticed when I got the vaccine, it did make a difference with my mental health. I could go out a bit more and do more things. It's really important to take care of your mental health, and I encourage you all to do that. So are you feeling good now? Oh yes. The next step would be getting a proper analysis by a professional psychiatrist. We'll be looking at the right medication. I've struggled with my mental health growing up, and many people assume because I had a good upbringing, supportive family, and a strong educational background that I don't really have mental health issues. No, and that's not exactly true. I do have those. Absolutely. Can you tell us about the Deaf What project? I came up with the idea back then in around 2017, when Tangled and Disability sent out a call for submissions. I wanted to do something that recognized deaf people. The interesting thing about deaf people is that we aren't all alike. It is quite a diverse community. The only thing we all have in common is our deafness. And so that's why it's called Deaf What? What is deafness? There's more to it. There are multiple experiences, and I wanted people to look at the portraits to see the diversity. But at the same time, find someone they could relate to and embrace that difference. For sure. What was your inspiration to start the Deaf What project? Well, I wanted to see more representation out there, and making sure that deaf youth have someone they can look up to. So how did you become an artist? Really, I grew up with theater, beginning in elementary school. When I went to mainstream high school, I was involved with theater, even with after-school programs, improv, productions, etc. Theater has always been a part of my life. Eventually, I went to Gallaudet University, where I dabbled a bit with theater there. I was considering a second major in the field of theater, but, with OSAP being expensive. I withdrew from that decision and focused on my psychology degree. After I graduated, I moved to Toronto, I got a job around the same time, and I became immersed in the theater world. So I've always been an artist. Not just specifically theater, I work with poetry, writing, creating plays. I aim to write a book someday. We'll see. Can you tell me about OSAP? Why is it so expensive? Definitely. OSAP stands for the Ontario Student Assistance Program. At the time when I went to Gallaudet University, it cost 40 to 50 grand a year for an international student. So when I thought about taking a fifth year, that was an additional expense that I was not ready to take on. But I still found my way to the theater stage. If you're passionate about something, it has a way of finding you. What are some of your future projects? Yes, I'll be releasing a video series soon related to art. For instance, collaboration with deaf artists and hearing artists, that kind of thing. I'm currently writing a play. Really, I plan to write more plays in the upcoming future. I want to see more deaf stories out there on the stage. That's really where my heart is. Sounds like an amazing plan. We're looking forward to seeing your work. Thank you. You seem busy. How do you keep balanced with everything? Back then, I would exceed 40 hours of working per week. I would work between 40 to 100 hours. But as of recently, I've been taking on less work. It looks like I'm doing a lot and keeping really busy, but realistically, my schedule is more spread out than concentrated. Yes, I'm still busy, but nowadays I choose carefully, accepting the work that truly fulfills me and makes me feel good. I don't have to say yes to everything anymore, and this allows me to have more time throughout the day, evenings, and weekends. There's more resting and taking care of myself. I've noticed the more rested I am, the better quality of work I can provide in comparison to being stressed all the time. And doing last-minute work, which produces a lower quality of work. It's something I had to adapt. Back then, my schedule was quite busy with barely any breaks, but now I allow room in my schedule for some flexibility and slower pace, and I hope others can learn from my experience. You mean self-care practice is a part of your business? Yes. As you want to present your best work. Correct, exactly. What makes you feel joy? Really, my friends. They've been incredibly supportive through so much, and they're still here, even though I've struggled with my mental health. They're still so supportive. Also, my puppy gives me joy. You have a cute dog. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with the hearing world? The hearing world needs to realize that not every deaf person is an activist, or should expect a deaf person to always advocate for whatever, because it can be exhausting, you know? The more you take action to support the deaf community, there would be less need for activism, and as a result, there would be less exhaustion in general. We just want more support in our community rather than having to advocate all the time. Deaf people need to just exist and just be. Be themselves and be happy as they live their lives. A group of people is more powerful than just one person when it comes to doing the work. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share with the deaf community? Yeah, I want to encourage deaf people to learn more than one perspective. If you just learn one perspective, then you're biased. For example, with families, they have their own traditions, habits, upbringings, and another family looks different. And there's nothing wrong with that, it's just different. Learning perspectives will help you imagine a bigger picture to be able to offer support in a better way with compassion and empathy. That's true, keeping an open mind will reduce harm. Absolutely, seeing the bigger picture can help us realize things and see things clearly. Thank you, Sage Lovell, for this interview with the Deaf What Project. We want to acknowledge the Canada Council for the Arts for funding this project. Thank you so much. Cheers.